Thank you so much. So hi to all of you, those who I can see and those who I can't. My name is Becky Bergman. I'm based at Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden. And I'm going to just spend the next 10 minutes talking about a recent publication that it just came out. The reference is at the bottom of the screen there. And it's the same title as I have for my presentation here. And then you also have my co-authors there who unfortunately can't be with us today. And Rafaela is at the same university as I am, but not Jan and Helen. So teacher experience of intercultural group work in higher education. This was a literature review, a scoping review. And why should that be interesting? Why do I think that should be interesting for you? So first of all, why or what is intercultural group work? And a definition here from Bort et al. So defined as a group of students from different cultural backgrounds working together on a task or project in the classroom. And here you have a picture of some of my happy students here at Chalmers doing just that. So why do I think we should care about this, and why do I care about it? Well, we know that students tend to group into fairly homogeneous groups on campus, whether that's nationality groups, whether that's domestic students, maybe different ethnicities, and so on. But students, like all of us, tend to group in fairly sort of homogeneous ways. And intercultural group work is one way to break down these invisible walls. So actually students working together, and the research that's been done shows that it can help intercultural competence. So when we're talking about internationalization, and one of the goals is often that we work with our students intercultural competence. This is one way of doing it. So students actually need to work together on a task and solve a task together. They need to communicate. They need to actually engage with each other. Diverse group work in general shows increased creativity. There are different ways of addressing a problem and different ways of seeing solutions. A greater self-awareness of what it is that you are able to do. We wrote a publication a couple of years ago about how it can aid integration because these groups of students are talking to each other, working together, and another study showed improved grades when it comes to group work. But of course, there are challenges. And the one that's mostly mentioned is that of language and communication. Typically, the fact that English, and we've all kinds of English, um, is tends to be the shared language, and but not just it's not just about language. It's communicative strategies and recognizing those and being able to communicate in general is tends to be raised as one of the key issues. But also putting the groups together. Different background knowledge that students come with from different places, different attitudes and engagement in working with this kind of setup. But the research that there is, and there is quite a lot of research into intercultural group work, but the majority of it actually comes from the student perspective, which of course is extremely important, and we need to know the student perspective. But this study was about, well, okay, students are important, but teachers are important too, because they are the ones who are making this happen in the classroom. And we need to know what their challenges are, what they're experiencing. So what is there out there for that takes the teacher perspective into account with working with intercultural group work, the international classroom? And what does it reveal about their perspectives and experiences? So our criteria for this study, we wanted to find any empirical study that showed teacher experience, attitudes, reflections of working with intercultural group work in higher education. And it was important that it was higher education for us, so we didn't look lower down in the educational scale, so to say. These were publications over the last 20 years. We started in 2022, so 20 years then. And also published articles published in English. You might want to question that. You're welcome to, but that was a decision we made in order to be able to process the material. So what did we find out? Well, we found our initial search showed about 1,300 articles that we went through. And of those 1,300, we found 36, which actually dealt with the teacher perspective and experience. And actually of those 36, 10 that really investigated this in any kind of detail. And as you can see from this graph, then the majority were dealing with virtual intercultural group work. So when universities, we've already heard about examples previously now, where, for example, COIL projects where universities hook up and groups work together. There are fewer which look at the on-campus experience, and even fewer about off-campus. I can explain what that is if you're curious to know. But the majority also conference articles, so very often sort of one-off initiatives where teachers are sort of trying something out. When we look at the discipline areas involved, I was surprised. I'm at an engineering school, and I'm surprised to find that engineering dominates here, actually. Not because there isn't a lot going on. It's a very international area, as we've heard, but there's very often very little research from engineering education, but they dominated here. Then we did a thematic analysis of, we coded the data that we had from these 36 articles, and we identified, we put it into a sort of chronological, the 3 chronological categories, if you like. So planning the group work in terms of what teachers needed to do to sort of set this up, implementing it, what the data said about that, and then teachers' reflections on their experiences working, which often came in the discussion part of the paper. So if we look at those 3 areas of planning, implementing, and reflecting, well, planning was setting the group work up, if they're going to have, for example, group contracts, how they were actually going to make this happen in practice. A lot, as it was virtual, a lot dealing with sort of syncing timing between countries, but also designing the course activities, organizing the team, setting these up. In terms of implementation, a lot to do with interaction. So, but also assessment, how to assess group work is always a bit of a challenge. Do you have individual grades, just a group grade, and so on. But yeah, a lot around interaction, which also came back in the reflecting. So reflecting on how much students were communicating, because after all, this is often the goal with group work, that students are actually communicating with each other. But also not just the students, but also the teachers communicating with each other to coordinate things, but also communicating with the students. And generally how important it is to be flexible when you're working with other cultures, other environments. So the key focus areas that emerged here, then the key categories, were this category of interaction, how important it was to facilitate it, and how you could make that work. The curriculum in terms of sort of constructive alignment, having the learning outcomes, which might include also the group work itself and the intercultural competence. Then the activities, what they might be and how to assess, and how this would build into cultural competences. There's often a goal of programs and institutions when you're working with internationalization. And then also teacher challenges came into this, as we've heard already before this morning. So teachers' lack of time, lack of skills, lack of training when they're sort of setting these things up. So the way forward then, our main conclusion is, well, we do actually need to find out more about the teacher experience and what it is that they are challenged by and working with when setting this up, and then particularly on campus, because even though we have these virtual exchanges, it tends to be the minority of students in most cases on campuses, but the majority of students are studying in an international environment at the university. So we need more research into the on-campus perspective, but also the fact that a course is connected, is part of a program, is part of an institution. The institution has goals, the program has goals. How does the course fulfill internationalization goals, group work goals, that are very strong in engineering education, for example. But most of the articles were very focused on what was happening in a course and not that bigger perspective. And once we have more information about that, once we know more about this, this teacher's experiences of this environment, then we can better provide teacher support, because it needs to be contextualized and it needs to meet teachers where they are. So before we go about designing initiatives to help teachers. So with that, thank you very much. I didn't hear a 1 minute, so I assume my timing is okay.
I could see you